formally requested the approval of the National Assembly to secure a new wave of multi-currency loans amounting to approximately $23.5 billion, 2.265 billion euro, and 15 billion yuan, and 757.9 billion naira. This totals about 45 trillion naira when converted. The borrowing plan, spanning multiple international lenders and development institutions, marks one of the most ambitious external financing proposals of his administration to date. Specifically, the president is seeking approval for the capital raising of up to $2 billion in the domestic debt market. This, he said, was to ensure the implementation of the presidential executive order on foreign currency denominated financial instrument local issuance program. Also, the president requested the approval of the legislative arm for the federal government's 2025-2026 external borrowing plan. The fresh borrowing plan, according to President Tinubu, would be used to finance critical projects cutting across various sectors of the economy, particularly infrastructure, health, education, water supply, among others.
The problem is the shocking trend of debt in this country is scary. I'm not saying you don't take debt. You take debt if you want to do things. But I would like to ask this government, all these debts they have taken thus far, what have we seen? Very soon they will be celebrating 30 kilometers out of 700 kilometers coastal road, and they'll show that as triumphalism. 700 kilometers, 30 kilometers. Is that up to 4% of the total project? So what have we seen? Yes, they've done some roads here and there, but for the level of debt we are also taking, then by the numbers scare me. 23 billion, 15 billion yen, another couple of amount in euro. Cumulatively, that money goes to 45 trillion naira. Our current budget is over 50 trillion. That's a sizable part of our current budget. Then by, if the National Assembly approves it, and I want them to scrutinize, and I please charge everybody watching me this morning, call your lawmaker. If the National Assembly approves that money, our debt profile will go up to 197 trillion. Before President Tinubu came in, maybe we were inching close to a little 100 or over 100 trillion. Today, if we hit 187 trillion, it will be that he'd borrowed over 60 to 70 trillion in the space of 2 years. What are we doing with these monies? And that's the big question we need to answer. So the other day, when they were celebrating the fact that they've cleared IMF COVID debt of 3.2 trillion, which, go and check the records, I think the other administration started paying, and they still have the, what's they call, the residuals in interests to pay, the special drawing rights to pay. But you are going to take 45 trillion on top of it at a time where things are bad in the country and people are not seeing the effects. In the papers recently, I saw the Attorney General say, they had recovered a lot of money, over $600 million and the likes, and they've put it in conditional cash transfer. The question is, we would like to see those that are getting the conditional cash transfer from this government. Please, if you are the very poorest in the society and getting conditional cash transfer, bring it out. As for ECOWAS, 50 years after, have we done a lot? Not too much. The economic zone is one. In 1979, we brought about free movement, just 4 years after we signed the ECOWAS Treaty. In Ghana, they had a scholarship scheme. We've had many events since April. But the colonial power still raised their ugly heads. We all know some of the countries that broke out. They went to form the Association of Sahel Nations, and the push Russia is giving them, vis-a-vis that of France. We remember how when there were conversations about the ECO, we remember the role France played. We remember the fact that most of these countries, their currency is still domiciled out of France. So it's been 50 years of push and shove. I think there's a word for it. It's called dégagisme. The future of the next 50 years is what we should look at now. Some gains, some losses.
I thought they said they paid the loan we were owing IMF because of COVID. And now we are borrowing again. Okay, so what was that drama all about? Saying we have paid off our loans. Propaganda, unnecessary optics. Now the same government has written to the National Assembly to say we have to take more money. And they are not taking the money from IMF and World Bank. They are taking from Japan. They are taking from China. They are taking from Europe. They are taking from everywhere. Yen, euro, dollar, pound sterling. So if we borrow this money, some funny character from the Ministry of Finance is saying that it will not increase our debt burden. No, the truth is that it will increase our debt burden. If you borrow, you pay back. So this is money being borrowed on top of the head of my grandchildren. This is the truth. And, okay, is there justification for it? President Tinubu says, well, we have to borrow this money to address issues in critical sectors, water, transportation, infrastructure, and all of that. Yeah, President Tinubu's arguments look reasonable. They need money. Why do they need money? Oil and gas is not producing money. Revenue is down. There are issues with tax revenue. So the government is technically broke. That's why they are looking for money. They are not just going to all these international institutions to beg for money. The president even sent a second letter asking for the federal government to generate bonds to the tune of about 745, right, billion. And what is bonds? It's also debt. 45 trillion to borrow from everywhere. However, I summarize by saying this, that the issue that we are concerned about, they may have the leg room, DMO may insist that they have the leg room, transparency and accountability. When they borrow this money, we don't want to hear that they want to buy new jets. We don't want to hear that the president wants to change his official car. We want to know how that money is spent. The issue in Nigeria is always about transparency and accountability. As for the fact that they don't have money, the revenue is low. Oil price, spot price of oil has gone down. So where is the money coming from? So they have to protect themselves, states and federal government. But what will they do with the money? That is the question.
Well, Dr. Abati, the irony in this is that the states have been able to reduce a lot of their debt burden to a large extent, but the federal continues to balloon and balloon their debt. Sometimes when we comment on some of the statements, it seems like we are skeptical. But truly, when the announcement was made around the cancellation or the full payment of the legacy debt, as it was called, there's a reason why there were a lot of questions around it, why there was a lot of investigation around it, because we knew that there was a looming announcement around more debt to come. Now, what are the implications of this? 52.7% is the increase that it will cause in our external debt burden. We're currently sitting at about $45 billion, so this will take us to $69.9 billion of debt. If you look at the International Development Association, we're currently the third most indebted nation to the World Bank's IDA in the world. We are third, Bangladesh is first, Pakistan is second, I believe. Now, why is this worrying? It's worrying because if this particular loan is approved and we do take it, it pushes us to our threshold of 40% debt to GDP ratio. Why are these thresholds created? These thresholds are created because we analyze the economy and we say at this point is where this debt becomes unsustainable. It becomes a risk to other areas of the economy, and generally it makes running our fiscal a little bit more complicated. So this loan will take us to that 40%. Zulum vowed that the state would strengthen its intelligence network and deal with saboteurs ruthlessly. The northeastern state is currently in the throes of a battle against insurgent Boko Haram and ISWAP fighters. Governor Zulum criticized the lack of equipment for the military and accused insurgents of having a superior technological advantage, saying the army does not have the necessary equipment on the ground to fight the insurgency. Zulum boasted that the government could end the scourge of terrorism in 6 months if it was able to remove what he called contractocracy, a situation where the anti-terrorism system benefited principally the interests of contractors rather than broader national interests. The governor lamented that contractocracy was fueling insurgency in the country. Some of your key takeaways from today's headlines.
So a couple of things. I think what Governor Zulum was saying in effect about contractocracy is the fact, what we have always said all these years. In fact, I did an interview with Governor Kayode Fayemi, which has a degree in war studies. And we talked about the fact that with this insurgency, hasn't a military-industrial complex built? And he said, you can argue that something like that is already building. And that's always the case. And it even snowballs even into the not-for-profit organizations that are working around there, the NGOs and the likes. All of a sudden, Borno's real estate has surged so much. To get home for expatriates and NGOs that work around there, you pay quite a princely amount. Also, the contractors on ground, which is a military-industrial complex building around there. And that's what happens when you fought a war for a very long time. And that's why we say, please, the government must return to the drawing board. At first, have we been able to save Mate? He said about 80,000 people have had to leave Mate. It was there to boost confidence. Has that been resolved? Other parts that we have fought and successfully defeated Boko Haram, now they are coming back there. 4 years ago, we rehabilitated people, put people back to Mate, but they are back there. But they're increasingly living there because of Boko Haram insurgents. He also talked about the fact that there are informants among politicians. So what's the investigation as regards that? We need to be able to have this investigation. And he's a governor, he's got some level of information. And even in the soldiers, we've always talked about the fact that, yes, there are some bad eggs amongst us. What are we doing to get rid of those people? And that's why I say intelligence is key. Intelligence, economic development, proper surveillance and reconnaissance, technological deployment, and education and provision of basic social amenities, healthcare, will be the key to unbundling things like that. See, in the 80s, when the Metiseni riot happened, there was a report done then to the government, and it indicated that if the poverty and the squalor continues in the north, all of this crisis will continue. And it's so easy to be able to recruit people like that. So he's led the charge. Where would the government follow? We need more equipment. I know the equipments are expensive, but we need to invest in security.
Let me start with Governor Zulum. Governor Zulum is not saying anything that is new or original or that he has not said before. Before now, he had called on he had alerted the federal government to the fact that there was serious crisis, a surge in insurgency in his state, Borno State, and he wanted the federal government to come and help. He was told at that time that he was spreading, alarm, fake news, whatever. But again, when the situation in the Mate local government area occurred, 300 villages and towns became deserted. Only Mate local government was standing. He also, in a show of solidarity and confidence with the people, went there and slept overnight, backed by the military and the police. Again, he called on the federal government of Nigeria to please rush to Macedonia and help us. And now he has granted an interview on television where he repeated more or less the same things. And what has he been saying? He's saying that contractocracy is part of the problem. In other words, there are some people who benefit from the military establishment who just do contracts at the expense of other people's lives and properties and security in other parts of the country. 2, he said that there are 50 columnists, even within the military, soldiers, who are acting as informants for these insurgents, bandits, terrorists, criminals. We all know that. 3, he said that President Tinubu should ignore sycophants, the people who downplay the issues in the Northeast and tell the president what he wants to hear. And he, as governor, as a man that is on the ground, he says he knows what is going on. We know all of this. 4, he said that kinetic approach alone will not solve the problem. He's saying that government has to look at non-kinetic approach, political and economic dimensions. All of this has been part of the narrative up to now. 5, he praises the military, that the military is doing well, and that if the president were to listen to the military, the military will know what to do to be able to find a solution to this problem. Well, it is standard practice for government officials to praise the military, to encourage them to see how they can do more. 6, he said, procurement process. We must take a look at that so that the military can get the equipment that they need early enough. So that's how I see all of this. It's not new. What is reiterated by Governor Zulum is the fact that, look, the battle against terrorism, banditry, insurgency, whether it's asymmetrical or not, has not been won. And government needs to do a lot more. And that the buck stops at the desk of President Tinubu. It's for President Tinubu to listen to him. The only controversial thing that I think Governor Zulum said in that interaction with the media was he saying, well, he opposes the idea of state police. He prefers forest guards. Well, that can be debated. But this is not the forum for that debate this morning.
Has consistently reiterated the need for greater intervention in Borno State regarding the status of security. He has done so repeatedly, and he has gone to the battlefront. This time he's bringing a different dimension, and he's talking about the bureaucracy, what he's calling contractocracy. Now, I found this to be quite a salient point, because we cannot downplay the impact that corruption and the politics of contracts has on governance in Nigeria. We know that when somebody becomes president or when somebody becomes governor, people move from all parts of the nation to Abuja or to the capital of whatever the state is so they can be closer, all waiting in the corridors of power so they can benefit from one contract or the other. Now, what is the result of that? The result of that is the poor governance that we see. It's incompetence. So in one moment it may be an incomplete road, but now in this moment it is now resulting in lapses in security. Of course, the army have maintained that all things are in order, they are realigning, and they have vowed that they will defeat these insurgents, and I believe they will. However, there are some niggling issues that the governor is highlighting. I found it a little bit ironic because in December of 2024, the governor had vowed to give contracts in his state to APC loyalists as a way of rewarding them. But this is how these things come back and bite you, because sometimes you may be a beneficiary of this system, but sometimes you might be on the receiving end of what happens when we operate these systems that are not based on meritocracy. I came across a very thought-provoking interview by a Chinese economist by the name of David Li, who's a former advisor to the Chinese Central Bank. In 2013, in a conversation with Fareed Zakaria, he said that corruption in China is not an economic problem, it's a political problem, because investments, infrastructure still gets built. Things still happen, the money is still used, but yes, politicians will skim off the top and it creates public distrust. But whatever projects are allocated are still completed. But we have a situation where our own corruption here is now becoming a political problem, an economic problem, and now a security problem. So something needs to be done, and there needs to be the political will to tackle it once and for all. He has this information. Can he hand it over to the necessary authorities? And can those authorities also have the boldness to follow through on these investigations, no matter how high and mighty the people implicated may be? Because these are very weighty allegations. Of course, we've already heard from the army as well that there's an increased push from the region at the moment, from the Sahel. There's so many dynamics happening in the region that are causing this push, this new resurgence of insecurity. So it's a reminder again that yes, we've seen that the administration has been doing more to try and renew relationships with the neighbors in the region, but I think more needs to be done in terms of cooperating with our neighbors and also monitoring the porous borders. Now, lastly, he also made mention to the rehabilitated former terrorists, and he said that there are no assurances that these people will not go back. And this is the unfortunate issue we find ourselves with. A situation where we say, let's pull them out, let's rehabilitate them. We need to review this and ask ourselves, Is this really the right way to handle the situation, especially given the risks that are currently being posed on the ground? That may need to be assessed. Yes to non-kinetic. However, maybe a re-strategizing is imperative.